The sun was slipping behind the ridges of Red Mesa when Talon Grayhawk rode through the last bend of the canyon. His horse, a dusty black Mustang named Smoke, moved slow under the fading light, its hooves crunching through dry brush and stone. For a month, Talon had been away helping the trading post at Fort Sterling with supplies, earning coin and gathering a few rare gifts for his wife. He imagined her face when she saw them, a silver hair comb, a bolt of blue cotton, and a pair of tiny beaded slippers she had once admired in town. The trail was quiet, too quiet. The wind that usually whistled through the canyon seemed to hold its breath. Even the crows that perched along the cedar trees kept still, as if watching him ride towards something unseen. Talon felt a chill ripple through his back despite the desert heat. He told himself it was only fatigue. A month away from home could make any man restless, even suspicious of shadows. The cabin stood at the foot of the western hill, half hidden behind a crooked fence and a patch of tall sage. He had built it with his own hands 3 winters ago, each timber cut, each nail hammered under long evenings of smoke and laughter. His wife Clara had painted the shutters white, saying she wanted the house to shine like morning light. Now, as Talon dismounted and tied Smoke to the post, he noticed the paint had started to peel. A lantern burned faintly through the window, its glow flickering against the curtains. He smiled to himself. She must be home early, maybe cooking stew, he thought. He wanted to surprise her, slip in quietly, place the gifts on the table, and watch her turn in astonishment. He stepped softly across the porch. The boards creaked under his moccasins. He paused, listening. Laughter low, hushed, but not hers. A man's voice. His smile froze. For a moment, he thought he misheard, that the wind had played a trick. But then came another sound, a whisper, a giggle he knew too well. Clara's. Talon's heart pounded so loud he could feel it in his throat. He took one step forward, then stopped. His instincts, Apache and soldier both, told him to wait, to breathe. But emotion burned hotter than reason. He pushed the door slightly open. The smell of smoke, whiskey, and lilac perfume rushed out to meet him. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, and what he saw hollowed him to the bone. Clara lay beneath the quilt he had traded a rifle for last winter, her hair tangled over the pillow. Beside her, another man slept broad-shouldered, white-skinned, his hand draped over her waist. Talon felt as if every sound in the world had vanished, leaving only the slow drum of his heart and the hiss of the lantern flame. He wanted to shout, to wake them, to demand why, but his voice was gone. His hands trembled. The small gifts he had carried fell to the floor, the comb, the cloth, the tiny slippers scattering across the wooden planks. Clara stirred at the noise, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him standing there in the doorway, her breath caught. For a long, unbearable moment, no one spoke. Talon, she whispered, pulling the sheet up to her chin. You weren't supposed to be back yet. The words sliced deeper than a knife. Weren't supposed to be back yet. Not I'm sorry. Not it's not what it looks like. Just shocked that he had returned too soon. The man beside her woke, blinking in confusion. He reached for his revolver at the bedside, but Talon didn't move. His silence, his stillness, was more terrifying than any weapon. Clara whispered the man's name, Henry, and Talon's jaw tightened. He recognized him, the new storekeeper from Fort Sterling, the one who had always smiled too long when Clara passed. Talon stepped back. His shadow fell across the doorway, tall and dark. I built this house for you, he said, his voice low, almost calm. Every board, every wall, with these hands, and now, even the air in it feels poisoned. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but Talon didn't wait to see them fall. He turned, pushing the door open wide to the night. The lantern light behind him flickered like a dying star. Without another word, he walked toward the stables, the dry wind tearing through his hair, carrying the smell of betrayal into the dark. Behind him, the cabin stood silent again, except for the sound of a woman weeping and a man's fearful breathing. The moon rose over Red Mesa like a pale ghost, casting long silver shadows across the dry land. Talon Grayhawk sat beside his campfire a mile away from the cabin, his Mustang grazing near the creek. The flames cracked softly, painting his bronze skin in shades of amber and red. His chest rose and fell in slow, controlled breaths, but his mind was a storm of memory and pain. He could still see Clara's face in that moment, the shock, the guilt, the fear. And worse, the other man's hand still resting on her waist. The sight had carved itself into him deeper than any blade could. He stared at the fire and muttered, "I rode 100 miles to bring her home gifts. All I brought back is ashes." Smoke lifted into the night sky like silent prayers, twisting toward the stars. The desert wind blew cold, carrying faint echoes from the cabin. Somewhere in that quiet, a coyote howled, long and mournful. Talon listened until the sound faded, then reached into his saddlebag. Inside were the trinkets he had gathered, the blue cloth, the silver comb, and the small beaded slippers. He held them in his hands, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he tossed them into the fire. The beads cracked. The silver glowed red. The scent of burning fabric filled the air. "Let the wind carry what's left," he whispered. He sat there for hours, not sleeping, not moving, just listening to the crickets, to the distant call of an owl, and to his own heartbeat that no longer felt steady. By dawn, his eyes were dry. The sky turned a pale orange, and with it came decision. He saddled Smoke and rode back toward the cabin. When he arrived, the door was open. The smell of spilled whiskey and cold ashes lingered inside. Clara sat on the porch steps, her face pale and drawn. She looked up when she heard him approach, her eyes red from crying. "Talon," she said softly, "please. I need to explain." He stopped a few feet from her. "Explain what?" His tone was calm, but it carried the weight of thunder. "That you chose a stranger's arms over mine? That you let him sleep in the bed I built with my own hands?" Clara stood, clutching the shawl around her shoulders. "You were gone for weeks. I didn't know when or if you'd come back. You said you'd be gone 10 days. It turned into 30. "I was working," Talon said. "For us, for this home." "I know," she whispered. But the nights were long and the silence kept growing. Henry came by to help with supplies. He stayed to talk, to fix the roof when it leaked. "I don't know when it changed. I swear I didn't plan it." Her words fell like cold rain. Talon looked away, his jaw tightening. "You didn't plan it," he repeated. "But you didn't stop it either." She stepped closer. "Talon, I'm sorry. I lost myself for a moment, but I never stopped loving you." He looked at her, then really looked and saw something different. Fear, yes, but not the fear of losing love. It was the fear of being caught, of losing comfort. The woman before him wasn't the one he had once known, the woman who danced barefoot by the river, who laughed at every sunrise. "You say you love me," he said, "but you love the life more than the man who gave it." Clara's lips trembled. "What will you do?" Talon turned toward the hills. "A man's heart can forgive, but it never forgets. I don't know which mine will do." He untied Smoke and mounted up. The morning wind blew through his long black hair, the tribal jewelry around his neck glinting under the sun. Clara reached out, but he didn't look back. "I'll return when the wind stops whispering your name," he said, and rode away. She stood on the porch, clutching the shawl, watching as the man she had once loved disappeared into the vast, endless desert. By noon, Talon reached the ridge that overlooked the valley. He stopped and looked back once, the cabin now no bigger than a speck against the earth. His chest ached, but beneath the pain, something began to stir. Not anger. Not yet forgiveness. Something deeper, a question. Why had he left so long in the first place? Why had the silence between them grown so wide that another man could walk through it? The desert stretched before him, wide and empty, like the space in his heart. Talon pressed his hand to his chest, feeling the rhythm of his pulse. "If I stay here," he murmured, "I'll die in that emptiness." He spurred Smoke forward. The wind rose again, swirling around him, carrying whispers of the past. But somewhere in its sound, he thought he heard something else. Hope. The river wound through the desert like a thin silver vein, glinting in the morning light. Talon Grayhawk rode alongside it, his Mustang's hooves kicking up soft dust with every step. For 2 days he had wandered aimlessly, guided by neither compass nor plan, only the ache in his chest and the whisper of wind that seemed to mock him. The land stretched endless before him, quiet except for the call of hawks circling overhead. Every sound reminded him of the cabin, the creak of wood, the softness of her laugh, the shattering silence that followed his discovery. He had left behind everything he knew. Yet even now the memory rode behind him like a ghost that would not let go. As the afternoon sun began to fade, Talon stopped to let Smoke drink from the river. He knelt beside the water, cupping it in his hands, watching his reflection ripple and distort. His long black hair hung loosely over his shoulders, strands brushing against the turquoise beads around his neck. He looked like a man carved from stone, strong, silent, but cracked in the heart. He whispered to the river, "Tell me where to go." But the water only carried his reflection away. Then, from across the riverbank, he heard movement. A figure stepped out of the trees, a tall, broad man wearing a dust-stained coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His beard was thick, his eyes tired but sharp. A rifle hung from his shoulder, though his hands were empty. "Didn't mean to startle you," the man said, his voice carrying easily over the water. "Ain't often I see someone camp alone this far out." Talon stood slowly. "Not many come this way." "That's true," the man said, stepping closer. "Name's Elias Crow. Used to be a preacher in these parts, before the war, before the drought took my town." Talon studied him silently, not sure whether to trust him. But something in the man's eyes, tired, haunted, yet honest, made him stay his hand. Elias nodded toward the fire pit nearby. "Mind if I share your fire tonight? I got coffee beans and no one to talk to." Talon hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "You can share the fire, but I don't have much to say." "That's fine," Elias replied, dropping his gear. "Men like us often say plenty without words." They sat by the river as the sun set, and the preacher brewed coffee in a tin pot, the smell filling the air. After a while, Elias spoke again, his tone quiet but probing. "You look like a man carrying ghosts. Want to tell me who they are?" Talon didn't answer immediately. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. Finally, he said, "I left someone behind. Someone I thought I knew. I came home to find her with another." Elias nodded slowly, staring into the flames. "Betrayal cuts deep, son. Deeper than most wounds." "I've known it too." Talon looked up, curious. "My wife," Elias said, "ran off with a rancher while I was out preaching mercy to men who didn't want saving. Took my boy with her. By the time I found them, both were gone. Fever took them before I could say a word." A heavy silence followed. Talon's jaw tightened. "You forgave her?" Elias stirred the fire. "Forgiveness ain't about them. It's about setting your own soul free. Otherwise, you spend your days riding in circles, chasing pain that won't die." Talon stared into the flames, his dark eyes reflecting orange light. "You speak like a man who's forgotten how to feel." Elias smiled faintly. "No, I speak like a man who learned that pain is just love with nowhere to go." The wind picked up, sweeping through the grass and rattling the trees. Talon turned his gaze toward the horizon, where lightning flickered faintly over the far ridges. I can't forgive her. Not now. Not when the fire still burns. Then don't, Elias said simply. But don't let that fire turn to ashes either. There's a difference between surviving and living, Talon Grayhawk. Talon blinked. You know my name? Elias chuckled softly. Heard of you. The Apache who helped the fort men when raiders struck last year. You've got a reputation out here. A good one. Talon frowned. Reputation means little when a man's home turns cold. Elias poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one over. Then build a new home. Somewhere inside you that no betrayal can touch. The words lingered in the air long after the fire died down. Talon lay awake under the stars, staring at the sky, hearing Clara's voice and Elias's words tangled together in his mind. As dawn crept over the desert, he made his choice. He would ride north, not to run, but to understand what kind of man he still was. Whether his heart would turn hard like stone, or find a way to live again. The dawn broke over the horizon like a blade of fire cutting through the night. Talon Grayhawk tightened the strap on his saddle and glanced toward Elias Crow, who was packing his gear near the dying embers of their campfire. The preacher's hat cast a shadow over his tired eyes, but there was a peace in his face that Talon envied. You heading north, Apache? Elias asked, voice rough from sleep. Talon nodded. There's a trail past the canyon that leads to Pine Hollow. I might find work there, or something to keep my mind busy. Elias poured the last of the coffee into a tin cup and handed it to him. Work can mend the hands, he said, but not the heart. Still, it's better than sitting in the ashes. Talon accepted the cup, his fingers brushing the tin's warmth. What about you, preacher? Where does your road end? Elias gave a small smile. Ain't sure. But I reckon if I keep walking, the good Lord will show me when I've gone far enough. They parted ways soon after sunrise. Elias took the southern path, humming a broken hymn, while Talon rode north with the river fading behind him. The wind carried the scent of pine and dust. The world felt wide again, dangerous, alive, and empty all at once. For the first time in days, Talon felt something other than grief, purpose. He didn't know what kind, but it stirred deep within him like a heartbeat waking after long silence. By noon, he reached a narrow trail leading into a mountain pass. The land shifted from dry desert to shaded pines, their branches whispering secrets to the wind. He dismounted near a stream and let smoke rest. As he filled his canteen, a faint sound broke the stillness, a cry, high and sharp, coming from deeper within the woods. Instinct took over. Talon grabbed his rifle and followed the sound through the trees. Within minutes, he found a small wagon overturned on the rocky path. A horse lay nearby, injured and panting. Beside the wreckage, a woman struggled to lift a broken wheel, her dress torn and face streaked with dust. She turned sharply when she heard him, fear flashing in her blue eyes. "Stay back," she shouted, holding a small pistol with trembling hands. Talon raised his palms. "Easy, I mean no harm." The woman's breathing slowed, her arms shaking. "The wheel gave out. My brother went to find help 2 days ago. He never came back." Talon's gaze softened. "You've been alone here since?" She nodded, lowering the pistol slightly. "I thought I heard wolves last night. I didn't think I'd last another day." "Your horse won't," Talon said quietly, kneeling beside the animal. One look told him it was suffering. He stroked its neck gently before ending its pain with a single, respectful shot. The woman flinched but said nothing, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't." "You shouldn't have to," Talon said, standing. "What's your name?" "Nora Whitfield," she replied. My brother and I were traveling to Pine Hollow. We were supposed to meet our uncle there. He owns a mill by the river." Talon looked toward the distant peaks. "You're heading where I'm going." A faint, hopeful smile crossed her face. "Then maybe I'm not cursed after all." He helped her gather what remained from the wagon, some canned food, a few blankets, and a small photograph of a family. Together they built a small fire near the stream. As night fell, the forest glowed in shades of blue and gold. Nora sat close to the fire, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "You don't talk much," she said softly, "but you carry something heavy. I can see it in your eyes." Talon stared at the flames. "A man doesn't always choose the burdens he carries." She studied him for a moment. "Sometimes helping someone else carry theirs makes yours lighter." The words lingered. For the first time since leaving the cabin, Talon felt a spark of warmth that wasn't from fire. He glanced at her, tired, brave, yet kind. Not pitying him, not prying, just there. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll find Pine Hollow. You'll be safe." Nora smiled faintly. "And what about you, Talon Grayhawk? Will you ever be safe?" He looked toward the stars. "Maybe when the wind forgets her name." The fire cracked softly, sending sparks into the night sky. Somewhere beyond the trees, a wolf howled, but its cry no longer sounded lonely. The mountain pass opened to a valley veiled in morning mist. The town of Pine Hollow sat quietly at its heart, a scattering of wooden buildings, along a river that shimmered like glass beneath the sun. Talon Grayhawk and Nora Whitfield rode side by side, their horses' hooves echoing over the narrow bridge that led into town. Smoke trailed from chimneys, and the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer broke the silence. It looked peaceful, but Talon had lived long enough to know that still water often hid the sharpest rocks. Nora straightened her back in the saddle, brushing the dust from her torn dress. "Uncle's mill should be near the north edge," she said. "I can't thank you enough for helping me." "You'd have done the same," Talon replied, though his voice was quiet. She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but not as strong as you. Not as brave." He didn't answer. Compliments slid off him like rain on stone. His heart was still tangled between anger and emptiness, his mind never straying far from Clara's face in the lantern light. But something in Nora's gentle courage reminded him that the world still held goodness, fragile, flickering, but real. When they reached the mill, a tall man with gray hair and a heavy coat stepped out. His face lit up when he saw Nora, Lord above Nora. He shouted, rushing forward. He embraced her tightly, relief flooding his voice. "We thought you were lost. Where's your brother?" Her smile faded. "He went for help after the wagon broke. He never came back." The man Samuel Whitfield stiffened, his eyes clouding. "Then I fear the mountains took him. You're lucky this man found you." He turned to Talon and extended a hand. "Sir, I owe you a debt." Talon shook it briefly. "No debt, just a journey shared." Samuel's gaze softened. "Still, I insist you stay for supper. The least I can do for a man who brought my niece home alive." Talon nodded politely. "I'll stay the night. Then I'll ride on." That evening, as the sky burned orange over the valley, they gathered in the mill house. The scent of roasted venison filled the air. Nora laughed softly at something her uncle said, her voice warm and gentle. For a moment, Talon felt almost human again, like the world's weight wasn't crushing his shoulders. But peace in the West rarely lasted long. Midway through supper, the door burst open. A group of men entered, their boots muddy, faces hard. The leader was a thick-built man with a scar across his cheek and cold, gray eyes. He looked at Talon, then at Samuel. "Evenin', Whitfield," he said. "Heard you got yourself company." Samuel's jaw tensed. "Evening, Colt Mason. What do you want?" Colt smirked. "You know what I want." The land by the river. It's ours by claim. You forged that claim, Samuel shot back. This land's been in my family since before your gang started running this valley. Colt's gaze shifted to Talon, sizing him up. And who's the redskin? Talon rose slowly, his eyes calm but sharp. Just passing through. Colt chuckled. Passing through, huh? You watch yourself, Apache. Pine Hollow's got a way of swallowing strangers. Nora stepped forward, her voice trembling. Leave him be, Colt. He's done nothing. Colt's grin faded. I see you found yourself a new protector. Careful, sweetheart men like him don't stay long. Before Talon could move, Samuel slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. You've made your threat now, leave. Colt stared for a moment, then tipped his hat. Don't say I didn't warn you. The river'll run red before the week's done. They left, their laughter fading into the night. When silence returned, Nora turned to Talon, her eyes wide with worry. He'll come back. Colt doesn't bluff. Talon looked toward the door. Let him come. Samuel sighed. You don't understand, son. Colt's got 6 men, all armed. Law here turns a blind eye. Folks are scared of him. Talon's gaze hardened. Fear only feeds men like that. That night, he stood outside under the stars, the cold wind brushing against his bare shoulders. He wore only his beaded necklace and leather trousers, the moonlight tracing the lines of his muscles and scars. His long black hair flowed behind him like a shadow. He whispered to the wind, Maybe this is what I was meant for, not to love again, but to fight for what's right. From inside, Nora watched through the window, the firelight reflecting off his silhouette. There was something in his stillness, a strength carved from pain and purpose. And for the first time in a long while, Talon Grayhawk felt something close to peace, not because he had healed, but because he had found a reason to stand again. The dawn was gray and heavy when Talon mounted his Mustang again. The wind carried the scent of rain and dust, whispering through the canyon like ghosts of his people. For weeks he had ridden far from his homeland, away from the echo of betrayal that still clawed at his heart. But the woman Clara, the one he'd found by the overturned wagon, had stirred something unexpected in him. She was fragile, yet fierce in spirit, and her eyes had reminded him of the sky before a storm, unpredictable but beautiful. That morning, as the fire dwindled and the smoke thinned into the air, Clara approached him, her hair loose and glinting gold in the early light. You're leaving again, aren't you? She asked softly. Talon looked toward the horizon, where the mountains stood like sleeping giants. A man cannot run from what still breathes inside him, he replied, his deep voice heavy with resignation. My home waits, ... even if only the ashes remain. She stepped closer. Then let me come with you. He turned to her, his dark eyes holding sorrow and something close to admiration. The path I walk is not kind to strangers, he said. It ends where hearts stop remembering peace. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. Then I hope yours finds peace when it's done. With that, Talon rode off into the rising sun, his silhouette swallowed by the hills. The cabin stood just as he had left it, or nearly so. The door hung off its hinges, the smoke pit was cold, and the wind pushed through cracks in the walls like whispers of the past. The place that had once been his sanctuary was now nothing more than memory. Talon dismounted, his moccasins sinking softly into the damp earth. He approached the cabin, his chest tightening with every step. The bed inside was bare, the sheets torn, the scent of her still lingering faintly beneath the mold, and Mira. Her name crossed his mind like a blade. He saw the necklace he'd carved for her, a piece of turquoise bound with rawhide lying broken on the floor. He crouched, picking it up, and for a long time he said nothing. The silence was heavier than any scream. Then he spoke softly, not to anyone living. You had a choice, and you chose him?" The words didn't hold anger now. Just truth. Just the weight of what could never be undone. He stepped outside, kneeling near the fire pit where they had once shared meals, laughter, and dreams. He dug into the earth with his hands and placed the necklace inside, covering it with dirt. The motion was slow, deliberate, like a man bearing not a trinket. But the last piece of his heart died by sunset. The rain began to fall. Talon stood by the cliff overlooking the valley, the storm clouds above casting streaks of silver across the horizon. Thunder rumbled distantly, echoing through the canyon like war drums. He remembered the night he'd left, how Mira had kissed him and whispered, promises that now felt like lies. He had fought battles and hunted for food thinking of her, imagining her waiting at the door, smiling when he returned. But what he'd found was not love. It was betrayal wrapped in a blanket of familiarity. He closed his eyes and let the rain run down his face. "I am done mourning ghosts," he whispered to the storm. Then, through the sheet of rain, he saw something move, a rider approaching slowly from the trail. His hand instinctively reached for the tomahawk strapped to his side, but when the figure grew clearer, he recognized the horse first. It was Clara, drenched, shivering, her face pale but determined. "You shouldn't have come," he said as she dismounted. "I told you," she gasped, her voice trembling. "I couldn't let you walk this alone." He looked at her for a long moment. She wasn't Myra. She wasn't part of the life he'd lost. But somehow, her presence didn't hurt. It eased the ache in his chest, even if just for a heartbeat. "The land takes what it wants," he murmured, staring at the valley. "But sometimes it gives something back." The thunder cracked above them, and she stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. He didn't pull away this time. Together they stood in the rain. The cabin behind them and the wide world ahead, two broken souls who had found in each other the faintest ember of redemption. And for the first time in a long time, Talon didn't feel alone. The rain had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. The air carried the scent of wet sage and pine, and the clouds drifted low over the distant mesas. Talon awoke beside the smoldering fire, his blanket damp, his thoughts heavy with the echo of everything he had buried. The cabin, once a symbol of love, now stood behind him, reduced to a shell of memory. Clara stirred beside him, still wrapped in her shawl. She looked small beneath the wide sky, fragile but alive, the firelight flickering against her pale face. "You didn't sleep much," she murmured. He gave a faint nod. Dreams are not kind to men who remember too much. Clara reached for her canteen and took a sip before passing it to him. Her hand brushed his, and for the first time, Talon didn't pull away. The warmth of her touch felt like something human, something that reminded him that not all connections end in betrayal. "You can't keep punishing yourself," she said quietly. She made her choice. "That doesn't mean you stop living." Talon looked toward the valley below, where the early light turned the land gold and alive. "Living is not the same as forgetting," he replied. "My people say the heart remembers what the mind tries to bury." Clara's eyes softened. "Then maybe you need to teach your heart how to remember differently." Later that day, they walked through the meadow near the river, the one that ran past the foot of his land. The grass was high, brushed by the wind like the movement of gentle waves. Talon stopped at the edge of the water, kneeling down to wash the ashes from his hands. He whispered something in Apache, a farewell, a prayer, perhaps both, and then let the broken turquoise necklace fall into the current. It drifted away, spinning and shining for a brief moment before vanishing beneath the ripples. "That was hers, wasn't it?" Clara asked softly. Talon nodded. "Once it meant love. Now it means freedom." They stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the sound of the river and the distant cry of a hawk circling above. "You could rebuild," Clara said finally. Start again. Maybe not here, but somewhere new. He turned his gaze to her. The wind lifted his long black hair, the sun glinting against the turquoise beads on his chest. And what would I build, Clara? A new cabin for ghosts? She smiled faintly. No, a home for the living. Her words lingered like a spark that refused to fade. That evening, as the sun bled orange over the horizon, Talon led his Mustang toward the trail that curved north away from the cabin, away from the memories that no longer served him. Clara followed, her mare keeping pace beside his horse. They didn't speak much. The silence between them was comfortable, no longer hollow or haunted. When the land opened into the wide stretch of desert, Talon slowed his horse and looked back one last time. The cabin was only a shadow now, framed by the dying light. A single column of smoke rose from the fire they had left behind like the final breath of something that had once been alive. He turned back to Clara. There was a time I believed my heart ended there, he said. But maybe it was only waiting for the right path to begin. Clara smiled through tears. Then let's walk it together. As the stars began to bloom over the twilight sky, they rode north, the desert wind wrapping around them like a silent song. Talon's mind was quiet for the first time in months. The ghosts had faded, the pain had dulled, and though the ache remained, it no longer ruled him. He thought of Myra not with hatred now, but with a strange kind of acceptance. Her betrayal had broken him, but it had also led him here, to the woman who had reminded him that there was still warmth in the world. When the moon rose high, Clara glanced at him and said softly, "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" Talon looked toward the stars. "Forgiveness is not for the dead," he said. "It's for the living. And tonight, I choose to live." The Mustangs trotted onward beneath the endless western sky, two figures riding side by side through the silver light. The land stretched before them wild, untamed, full of promise. And somewhere in the rhythm of hoofbeats and heartbeats, Talon found peace. The story of love, loss, and redemption ended not in fire or vengeance, but in the quiet dawn of a new beginning.